Alrighty, let's talk about shame and how it impacts our decision. Now, the interesting thing about shame is that it's actually one of the cover emotions that influences our decisions on a daily basis. And many of us um, have never really known how to identify when we're feeling shame. So today I'm going to speak about that and also how it impacts our decisions. And so you can be more aware around, am I functioning from a place of shame, or am I functioning from a place of my, higher self potential and those sort of things. So let's get right into it. Okay. So Glenda's coming in too. So shame is a cover emotion that um, underneath it is this fear that there's something wrong with me. So it's generally this fear of rejection, this fear of making a mistake. And we have this fear because we have internalized that when something has gone wrong in a social setting, we are the person that created that mistake or maybe created the whatever it was. And so we blame ourselves. We blame ourselves for conflict. We can blame ourselves when we may have said something and things went awkward. We can sort of blame ourselves a lot around what it is happening in a social setting. This is really common because growing up, when when we are looking at how to behave as kids, like when we're taught how to behave, our caregivers were never really taught how to do it in a way that was like nourishing, caring, um, in a way that didn't shame us. So many of us have grown up where our parents or caregivers have used shame to control us. And what that actually means is they can say things like, "What's wrong with you? Why would you do that?" Be very critical of us. So, what are you wearing? You always do that. You're not very good at this. And so they can use criticism and negative comments to try to control us. And that's what creates this shame cover emotion, because we might bring some sort of vulnerability to our parents and they shut it down, minimize it, dismiss it. And that makes us feel like, oh, well, if they think that it's not important, then maybe there's something wrong with me for even thinking that way. And so that's how we internalize shame. When someone doesn't like us, rather than looking at the bigger picture, we look at it as a rejection to, I am the problem. There's something wrong with me. I'm unlovable. I'm not worthy. Um, feel as though something is wrong with me. So we know when we do that, when we blame ourselves, you will be pretty sure that shame is behind that. So the other way we can see is through our career and business. Say if we want to start a business and all that sort of thing, it will bring up our value, our worth. Um, and so we can listen to the inner critic when it comes up, and that can tell us to sort of like stop what we're doing, hide away, we're not capable. So it can create this lack of confidence and lack of self-esteem. And another way we can look at how we do with shame. So there's one way where we go hide, we can hide away from the world and we stay small. Another way we can see it too is where we overcompensate with material things, status, and wealth. So we all know the person that has, that fancy car, the fancy home, the maybe a CEO of a company, and has not many people they really deeply connect with, because the way that they have created this external validation around them to feel powerful. And so what we're going to talk about today is how we create internal validation so we don't need to get it from the external. I mean, it's very supportive to have both. So it's not like, it's not like we shouldn't have external validation, but it's that we it would be better if we didn't just rely on external validation, because that means that if someone is not okay with us, we then see that as there's something wrong with me. So, so it distorts our thinking. What I see in you is different to what you see in yourself. So what you can see when you look through the lens of shame, this is such an interesting thing, because distortion is really like, I see myself completely different to how someone else sees me. And what shame does is it amplifies all of our faults within us, our insecurities, that we think other people can see in us. And the reality is not true. That is not true. That's not what other people can see in us. However, if other people can only see that in us, say if they see our insecurities, our weaknesses, that is a reflection of their own insecurity and weaknesses. To not be able to see your potential or see your strengths and just see your weaknesses, that is more of a reflection of where they're at in their life than where you're at. Because if I see someone's potential, I see their strengths, I see all the incredible things that they can do, their beauty, their value, their um, intelligence, and I can see it in someone else, but I can't see it in me. The reality in that, which is really interesting, is that it is there in me, but this cover emotion, shame, is actually stopping me from seeing it within myself. It doesn't mean that it's not there within me. The reason why it's there within me is I would not be able to see it in someone else. So I would not be able to see someone else's beauty, intelligence, value, someone else's, light, energy, if I could not access it myself. So I can access it. It's just that shame stops us from believing it within ourselves, believing that I too have that. So it impacts our ability to receive love, care, support, and warmth, because we believe we're not. If I believe I'm not good enough, valuable enough, worthy enough, then who would love me? Who would want to be warm towards me if I'm not those things? So it's really hard for us to receive something that we're not accessing ourselves. It does not mean we're not getting that love, care, and support from people. It's just that we find it difficult to feel it within ourselves. So it impacts our ability to see our light, our potential, and our higher self. It's this cover. I like to say it's almost like a cloud that sits over us, because it's like really covering who you really are. And this is why people you might meet, if they give you a compliment or they say to you, oh, I can see in you this light, this brilliance, and you kind of feel this like ick or this discomfort within yourself, that's just because it was never really a familiar thing to get those sort of compliments, and it feels uncomfortable and unsafe at times, and I'll go into that. So I've got a little note here where I say, you were not born this way. You were not born with this shame cover. The ability to feel shame is important for socialization, just as a whole, in tribal times, as humans. So we have that emotion, shame. Every emotion is important. It, however, what has happened is our caregivers or our parents have been shamed themselves. So they have passed down the way of parenting through shame. So I see myself through shame. So I will believe one of the core beliefs there, like a really core belief there, is I'm unlovable, I'm not valuable, I'm not enough, and I'm not worthy. So these are covering up who you really are, and they feel true. And the reason why they feel true is because shame is such an intense emotion to feel in the body. So what happens is when we're feeling it in the body, and I'll kind of go into that slide later on, but I'll go into it now as well, is our shoulders will kind of hunch forward, because Shame is this protective mechanism where we shut down. It's in the shutdown response on the nervous system. So it's after fight, flight, in shutdown. We hide. So my body is going to protect me by going in and looking down and sort of protecting myself by crouching forward. This is why when we feel shame, we just want to hide away from the world. We don't want people to see us in this. We feel embarrassed. We just want to keep away from people. So it keeps us disconnected from people that could potentially be supporting us as well. What can happen if we have this core belief around shame, this cover of unlovable? We can create situations without meaning to on a subconscious level. No one does this consciously, or some people may, who knows. We do things that hurt ourselves and reinforce the belief of being unlovable. And it's not until we get to a point of self reflection that we can go, oh, wait a minute, I was drawn to that person because they shared qualities that was familiar to me. And I thought they loved me. But then I realized that they started treating me poorly, which reinforces a belief that, is there something wrong with me? Am I unlovable? And what happens with that is the reason why we're drawn to certain people who feel familiar is because we are actually we're wanting to heal that part of us. We're wanting to heal those relationships in our lives. And the familiarity is normalized. It's like you're growing up with a highly critical parent and then internalizing that critic and doing that to ourselves. That's what we do. We criticize ourselves and it becomes a norm. It's like this normal way of being. So I might, when I'm trying something new, a new sport, and I make a mistake and I say something to myself like, oh, you idiot, I can't believe you even did that. Like that's quite a shame-based way to um, punish myself. And so we then internalize it. And so when someone treats us poorly, at first it can be subtle and we won't even notice it because it's so normalized from growing up with that treatment. It's been so normalized that we won't even realize that they're saying certain things that are unhealthy. And it's not until we reparent that part of ourselves that we can start to look at it and go, oh, that is not the way that I want to be treated, because I know to show myself love and care and empathy, this is how I would speak to myself. So it's not until we start to meet our own needs that we know where to connect with people who are healthy. And then we don't reinforce that belief. And then we start changing the way people treat us because we have these standards. I hope that helped with, I hope that makes sense. And if not, please pop in some questions. So it's like the self-fulfilling prophecy, the distorted thinking. So attracted to partners that also have unprocessed shame and project this onto you. You miss the red flags because we have not accessed that part of ourselves to feel, we haven't accessed that part that feels unworthy and need to perform to prove our value. So as children, we would have had to fawn or perform in some way to be lovable. And so what they say for parenting now is, if you can love your child when they're not performing, what would that look like? When they're not doing a task or doing their homework, or when they're just sitting there, what would it look like to just love them as they are, just for existing? And so with in relationship, we are taught, and we can be drawn to partners where they're sort of controlling the situation, and we go into a fawn response because we've been taught that's how you can be loved, is if you people please and do things for others, hold space for others, do practical things, provide whatever it is. And so then we self abandon in an attempt to be loved. This happens very subconsciously. So it's not until you start to understand your process in relationships that you can get to this place. So, common dynamic is someone who controls others with shaming them by being hurtful and saying aggressive things. and they can act aggressively too. And then we go into the fawn response, because that is the dynamic we may have grown up in, where our caregivers were aggressive or angry, and we learnt to shut down, be quiet, go, really just do whatever it takes to keep the peace. And then what happens if we stand up for ourselves against these people who use control dynamics, stuff like that? That's when it ends up creating conflict, to a point where we either leave or we continue this cycle. And the conflict comes in because the person who uses control tactics no longer has control over the situation. So then that's where conflict comes in. The only way that you can work through this in a relationship is for both people to get support, professional support, and are committed to changing their coping mechanisms to conflict. Because some people go into fight flight and some people go into shutdown. And I'll go into that, more of that. So another self-fulfilling prophecy and distortion is around career and being undervalued at work by bosses and colleagues, and believing that, for such a long time, I believed that for myself. And that was one of the big, deep core beliefs that I needed to work through to create my own business in counseling. And it was not an easy uncovering. There were layers to this. And I realized that I kept on putting myself into environments that it wasn't that they didn't value me. It wasn't that I didn't feel valued, but what it was it was an environment that didn't really align with my passion and my strengths and the value that I wanted to bring. And so there was a out of alignment there. And so it just kept reinforcing for me, this core belief that I had, or maybe you're not being valued here because you don't really want to do this way, you want to do it that way, or however it was. So not seeing your strengths, and other people can see your strengths, but you find it hard to access your strengths. So that's another distortion. So shame, if we continue on believing the shame, it will really cover up your ability to access and see your strengths. What does internal validation look like? So I don't rely upon the opinion of someone else to feel lovable. Now, this is probably one of the hardest things for us to even learn in a society where there's a lot of external validation. So how do I not rely on other people to feel valuable and worthy? It's by seeing all parts of ourselves and being able to access the parts that feel unlovable and lovable, worthy and not worthy. So all these parts of us. So once we access these parts, we then have this choice to meet our own needs. And that doesn't mean, when a lot of people believe meeting your own needs, you've got to do it on your own. Like, go sit in a corner and like be present with yourself and do it on your own. And that's not what meeting your own needs means. It means to be able to access the parts of you that are vulnerable and the parts of you that feel powerful, and bringing them together to go, what are the needs? What needs do I need to implement to strengthen the parts of me that feel vulnerable, to meet their needs, to hear myself, to understand myself? Once I get that, which I brought in before, then I have the ability to be in relationship with people in a career where I am being valued and loved, because I know what that is. I know exactly what I need to do there. I've looked at that part of me, and it said that I needed, you know, an even energy exchange. I need someone to hold space for me also. I need words of affirmation. So I can then access that part and say, when I'm with someone, I can see when they can give me and meet that need with me, or whether they can't. So we're very clear on it. So what have we got now? When I'm not treated that way, I don't stay and build trust within myself. So the thing that I did, which was quite big for myself personally, is when I realized what I needed in relationship to another, including career, I realized that I had to make those moves, and it was important for me to make those moves around leaving a situation if it wasn't healthy for me. This is a very hard thing to do, especially when we have attachment that comes in. So when we start to have boundaries, standards, and we know what we need and want, we build trust within ourselves in the decisions that we make. Until we start having those boundaries and knowing what our standards are, it's really difficult for us to have self-trust. So fear comes into this, and I spoke about this, where we go into there's a few different dynamics of what happens when we need to soften. So if we remove the shame, what we then do is we start to soften into life, right? And into relationships with others. In order for us to soften, we need to have healthy environment, people, and situations around us, because it's not safe to soften with someone that's projecting their own shame or abusive or unhealthily communicating. So we want to soften with people that are healthy. So often we can find it really hard to trust. So this is where the fear and the protector comes in. We can find it hard to trust others, receive love or support. This is because when we were young and we were soft, because weren't born hard, we weren't born with walls up, we weren't born with, being really angry all the time. So when we were young, we were soft, we were vulnerable, and we showed that. And when we showed it, we were shut down, dismissed, pushed away. This happens on a continuous level. That's what trauma is. So when we are looking at softening and removing the shame, we'll find it hard to trust others. So trusting for the people to support us, encouraging us, or giving us compliments. The way that you'll know this is your mind will go, oh, they're just saying that because I pay them, they're my therapist. Or I've heard that a few times. Or they're just saying that because they want something from me. Or I think they're just saying that because they're being nice. Like they don't really mean it. And so our mind can come in and create a story around the discomfort that we're feeling when we receive this. There are other people that can use aggression and money to control and bypass feelings of being out of control. So it's kind of like using this aggression and money or blame is keeping us in the shame. The flight response coming in, quick fix, something that will soothe us without us doing and facing the consequences of our actions when we're in a coping mechanism or addiction. So what do I mean by that? We all want to go on a holiday when something hard happens. Like we all have this flight response. I can tell you now, this is something I've had many times as well. We can have like wanting to be rescued. And, example of this is we've got high stress levels with money and we just have this fantasy of winning the lottery. That's our flight response coming in, wanting to do this. Quick fixes can be any sort of dopamine hit. So it can be from relationships to alcohol to foods to whatever your choice is, shopping. We've all got something that we use as a coping mechanism. When we stop using that coping mechanism, we are sitting in the tension of not getting that quick fix, of not getting that dopamine hit. And that's when our stuff can come up. That's when we can start to feel stressed about certain things. We can feel discomfort in the body. So this is why it's so important to have support around the environment we're in, this people and situations, because we need to be able to meet our needs that the coping mechanism was meeting. Not investing in ourselves because we don't trust that we're capable of achieving the outcome. So this is shame again. If we're living in shame, we will have a part of us that's like, who do you think you are that you could think you can heal that or do, you can be anything more than what you are, or the mind can come in and try to protect you from moving forward with investing in yourself. That's selfish to do that. You don't have the money to do that. So it can come in with all sorts of excuses. The other part of this is we can go over, like over into a fantasy of investing in ourselves and expecting the person who is supporting us to fix the situation with a solution. So they might have a quick solution for us. That's another way we can try to bypass. So the fear of shutdown. So some of us can go into the fight flight and resonate with that more, and others can be more resonating with shutdown freeze with shame. Shame does live more in shutdown freeze. The reason why I showed you fight flight area is because we're running from shame when we're in fight flight. Like it's kind of like this getting away, trying to get away from it. When we're in the shutdown freeze response, we're in shame. We are like, we feel like it is our identity. It's who we are. I am weak. I am vulnerable. I'm not capable of anything. All my insecurities will come up and I will blame myself for where I'm at. And so that's when our shutdown response comes in. That's when we feel the shame. We'll want to hide away from the world. We want to disconnect from people. And we won't want to seek support because we don't feel capable of getting ourselves out of this situation. So that is a place where we find it hard to access our power, strength, and value. We do have glimmers, and glimmers in this space are little parts of our mind. And when we feel a little better in the body, it will say something like, you can do this, go for that walk, call that friend. And when we're in this shutdown response, the most supportive thing you can do for yourself is to call a friend, get support from someone, a therapist, someone professional who can help you come out of this state, because what we actually truly need in this state is co-regulation, connection. What we're fighting is co-regulation and connection. We kind of we hide away from it, and it's the very thing that we need to bring us back up the ladder. So how to work with fear. So we've got the inner critic. All of us may know the inner critic, because shame is like, this is where shame comes from, is like this inner critic that we have, this internalized sort of judgment of ourselves. And our ability to observe the inner critic is what will really support you to come out of shame. If we don't observe the inner critic, we allow it. So there's a difference between being identified with the inner critic. If I'm identified with the inner critic, what that means is whenever I have an insecurity and I sort of make a decision based on that, I'm identified with that part of me that doesn't feel good enough. So what do I mean by that? I'm not going to try, I really want to try this thing at the gym, right? Maybe I want to try a class at the gym. This is just an example. I'm really excited about it. And then all of a sudden, my inner critic comes in. It's like, you can't do that. You're not as fit as the other people. You're not as strong. You don't have the active wear that everyone else has. You look silly in your active wear anyway, and you've got bits hanging out like rolls and whatever, right? The inner critic's coming in. For me to be identified with that is, I believe it. Oh, okay, maybe I just won't go then. I'll just stay at home. I'll just go for a walk. I'll take my dog for a walk. So then I justify it and I'll be like, I'll go for a walk. So I'm listening to it. Here's how I can observe the inner critic. Okay, so I have all those thoughts and I'm like, wow, that's interesting. I'm really uncomfortable about going to this class. There's all these thoughts around that. The inner critic has come in strong. Okay, I didn't realize I felt a little insecure about those things. And I thought, okay, that's interesting. So I'm kind of looking at it as interesting and I'm a bit curious about it. What do I need? This is what I would ask myself. What do I need to support me to go to the gym? Maybe I need to have a chat to the instructor and see what the gym session's like. I'll speak to the instructor and see if it is something they believe that I would be capable of. And then I speak to the instructor, and they're like, yep, this is for all levels, da, da, da. So it gives me that reassurance to go attend it. And I can even be vulnerable with them and say, I feel a little insecure coming and a bit vulnerable coming to this session. And so then I'm creating connection and communication around my vulnerability. So I'm not bulldozing through and just saying, get it done, push through. I'm actually saying to myself, what do I need? Do I need some sort of support to get there? Do I need to express how I feel? Would that support me? So we all have different needs there that can support us when our inner critic comes out. Then we've got softening, the ability to soften and see the parts of all of us that are hurting. So anger, blame stops us from seeing our pain. So if we're angry with ourselves and we're blaming ourselves, if we're angry with others and blaming others, we really are, that's covering, it can be a cover emotion too, what's happening underneath. Our hurt and upset, our vulnerability. So if we get stuck in anger and blaming, we harden, we get really hard. So what we want to do is start to soften around safe people. So that's when, if we are generally someone that's like hardened and angry, there's a reason. There's always a reason behind it. So we want to start to soften with safe people where we can practice doing that. So this, it's not that we're not getting it. So it's not that we're not getting warmth, nurture, and love. Often we find it hard to receive because it was unsafe. So it's starting to access the parts of us that want that and feel into when people are being nurturing, warm, and caring. We can have a negative association with it because it could have been used against us when we were young, or we could have been teased for being soft. So then there's also meeting your needs, giving myself what I didn't receive when I was younger, like even asking myself the question, what did I not receive when I was younger that I really needed? What was that? And knowing that there will be some discomfort around receiving it as an adult because it was not a safe thing to receive. That's why we find it hard now as adults. So it's not familiar and it brings a new way of being, making sure our environment is safe and the people in our lives are supportive. So when we're meeting our needs, we're creating new habits. And in order for us to do that, we really need to have a safe environment and supportive people that lift us up around us. What does shame feel like? So shame will be different for all of us. You may all have a different experience of it. For me personally, it's interesting because I've got a dry throat. Maybe I'll have some water. I wonder what's happening there. It can feel like tightness in the throat, shoulders caving in, stomach tightness, tightness in the head and face. You might feel tight, tension. There's a fair bit of tension through the body, discomfort and dysregulation. So we can feel this unease within ourselves and a heaviness. You might find that you've gone out and you've been social, you come home and you keep replaying something that you said when you were out and you keep replaying it and notice yourself going into this heavy state and you're tired. You're really tired, but you can't sleep. But you're ruminating over this thing. That could possibly be shame that you're feeling. Notice what's happening in your throat. Notice what's happening in your around your stomach or your chest. Sometimes I've missed that part. Sometimes we can have our chest feels compressed in. And the feeling you will get is wanting to hide. It's like not wanting to socialize, not wanting to connect with anyone, just wanting to hide. And we feel fragile, weak, and vulnerable. And we have this like low capacity for feedback or criticism. So when we go to people and we're feeling shame, what we really need is co-regulation. So for someone to sit with us and to be with us. We don't want advice. We don't want a fix it. We don't want you to fix it. We just want to be connected with someone who's present with us and allows us to just say how we feel because we're generally feeling quite vulnerable in that place. If we listen to our shame, it disconnects us from others and creates isolation. This is something that I discovered quite deeply is that if we want to speak to a friend, right? But we realize that we've said something to them that has offended them, or that maybe we've done something that they might judge us for. Rather than leaning into a conversation with us, shame will get us to ignore the conversation, maybe not even call that person. So it disconnects us from people because we are scared of being shamed, embarrassed, dismissed, all that sort of thing. So it's really important to be around safe people when you're first starting to lean into these conversations. The way to widen our window of tolerance is with the observer, which is what I spoke about with the inner critic, is observing our experience. It's time to see, feel, and witness your shame and not be controlled by it. So there was a few examples that I gave you around that. So here's the window of tolerance. What is within the window is when we're regulated and when we can function, go out, try new things, step out of our comfort zone. So that's in the middle there. Outside the window of tolerance is where we can then go into a shutdown. I can't. Um, it can be, there's a few things that come up. I can't do this. Do you think, who do you think you are? You look terrible. Gee, you're ugly. Whoa, you're so dumb. Who says that? This is when we know shame speaking. They looked at you weird because of what you were wearing or saying. They walked away when I was talking. I must have said something stupid. I'm never doing that again. So we point inwards with shame and we blame ourselves. This is how we know that we're shaming ourselves. Here's why that's not accurate. The person, say, who you're talking to, who walks away, could be having their very own experience that has nothing to do with you. We think it does because we don't know what's happening for them. They could have had an activation of their own. They could have something going on for them. Maybe they have a sore stomach and they had to run to the toilet, and we've gone, oh my God, I've said something wrong. So it's not an accurate representation of the situation, it's a distortion. So we stay small, and why it reduces the window of tolerance, because our stress levels, in order for us to widen our ability to step out of our comfort zone and be stressed, we need to bring the observer on board, and we need to be able to go, okay, I'm feeling shame and I'm going to meet my need of whatever I need at the same time as doing that thing that scares me or that brings on the inner critic. So we want to widen our ability to do that, because if we don't, then we let shame rule our decisions. Support. The biggest thing that I've learned about shame is the way to help you widen your window of tolerance around it and make decisions that are aligned with your authentic self, which is underneath shame, is through support. Having people in your life that lift you up and support you, environments that are really healthy and situations that are healthy. The reason why is that for shame to live and to amplify and grow, I almost think it's like this growth, right? For it to live and grow, it needs that external person to continue to poke that wounding that reinforces that belief system. So if they continue to poke that and reinforce it, it will be so difficult to come out of that shame spiral, because the people, it's like, they say the people we have around us, it influences our lives. This is why. If you've got people who shame themselves, they will shame you too. And you will feel it in your interactions with them, and you'll feel quite judged by them. That will continue to reinforce your self-doubt and the inner critic. And it just feeds it. It feeds the inner critic, it feeds the self-doubt. So in order for us to come out of shame and to start to widen our window of tolerance, we really need support from people who lift us up and who see when we're not doing okay and can hold space for us, not try to fix it, not judge us for things, but to really be there for us. This is where you can start, is with people, environments, and situations. Okay, I know there was a lot of info in there, so I would love to hear your comments and anything that you might want to be coached on. We'll go straight into it. We'll get stuck straight in if it's something that you would like to speak about. Who would like to start? Sophia, go for it.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Oh, great. Good. What did you like about it?
I just feel like it just brought, yeah, I just feel like it's been brought to my attention,
Great.
really what shame is. And I realize how much I feel shame in my life.
Yeah.
One area in particular, I think that I feel shame is when I'm hard on myself, for not doing the work or doing enough.
Mhm.
Um, and I feel like this has kind of been a reoccurring theme for a while.
Yep.
Yeah. And yeah, for me, it's challenging the most challenging part is to work through the shame.
Yeah.
But I feel like, yeah, you've given some really good tips as well now to help
Great.
with that. Yeah.
If you were to have a question around your process and what you need support with, what would that question be?
Um, you've probably already answered it, but it's more about catching the shame before it gets bigger. Like,
Ah,
how can I do that?
yeah. Okay.
Mm.
Is it okay if I ask you some questions around that?
Hmm.
Okay. And whenever you don't want to answer anything, just feel free to be like, "Oh, I'm not comfortable answering that."
Okay.
Okay. So, catching the shame before it gets bigger. What happens? I would like to know the difference. Like, so, um, what does the bigger shame feel like for you? Or what do you notice with that?
Um, out of control.
Out of control. Yep.
Too big for me to tackle, like humongous.
And when it's humongous, like when it feels humongous, uh, how does that manifest in your everyday life?
I put things off,
Okay.
procrastinate, and then the inner critic comes in.
Uh-huh. Just writing some notes too. So it feels humongous. When it feels, before it feels humongous, how does it start? What's the, because it feels like it's a scale.
Um, it's a thought, and like a thought about a situation that may have happened. And then yeah, the mind is making a story up about it.
Okay. And then the story. So the mind's made up the thought. This is really great awareness too, by the way. The thought, then the mind makes up the story. And how do you, I'm going to use these words, but whatever resonates with you, like, how do you pick up that story and create momentum with it? Like, how does that happen?
Oh, I feed into it.
Yeah, how do you feed into it?
I reinforce that the story is true.
Huh?
Um, can't see the other perspective, or yeah, like I guess trust comes in, trust of myself and my inner kind of knowing.
How do you reinforce it?
Um, replaying it over my mind, or maybe taking some action to feed into it.
Yep. Okay. So replaying it and then taking action. So that's like the identified part that goes, oh, okay, this is true.
Mm.
What makes it hard, would you say, for you to not attach to it?
Um, I guess like the connection to it.
Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
thinking it could be a state. What's your state like in that? When you're in that place, what would you say your nervous system's doing?
Yeah, probably dysregulated and not grounded, not thinking straight, like not meeting my own needs in terms of like lacking sleep or,
Yeah.
the basics.
And it's so hard. And it's so interesting because we're coming back to when you're like, oh, I'm not doing the things that I need to be doing. And often it's because we're so dysregulated when we're feeling shame. And you know how else like support is what we need? Like that ultimately, like that's what we need to get back to a regulated state is that co-regulation. And when we don't have that, our mind is going to create all sorts of scenarios to try to get comfort and soothing. So it will go to whatever it can possibly find to get some sort of comfort and soothing. So that's what your mind is doing when it's in that space. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. Hard one to break.
Yeah. So you reinforce, and then do you say it's quite an isolating experience too? Do you find it? Yeah.
Yeah, it seems to always come up when, yeah, I'm alone and people are busy or, yeah, no one to kind of turn to.
Yes.
It feels like quite a lonely journey
Yeah.
to go through it. So yeah, I guess I kind of go back on my coping mechanisms of what did work previously, but didn't serve me.
And that's, isn't that interesting though? Like that's how our mind works because it's like, well, find the familiar thing that supported us in the past. So what you've identified is like if you can have another, so one way is from support from others, but then what's another way that you can support yourself if other people are not around and unfortunately in this world because we live so individual and isolated, we don't have always someone that can support us. So if you don't, what would be another way to create that for you, do you think?
Um, yeah, just putting in self-care practices, I guess. Maybe changing my state, having a cold shower or jumping in the ocean or yeah, doing
Yeah,
something
yeah.
hearing.
Something as simple as that is actually really supportive for your nervous system. Sometimes I even have a nap. Sometimes my
Mm,
body, because in shame we're like a little bit tired, we want to isolate, but sometimes a nap can like rejuvenate us, something like that can be supportive. But you're creating a list of things that can support you, even going to a cafe where there's other people around, going to some sort of like lesson yoga or something where there's other people around. At night that's a little difficult. But shower or yeah,
yeah.
shower be supportive.
And then there's certainly layers because then it's like you put yourself in different environments and it's like, oh, something else might pop up and another story in the mind might come through. So yeah, I understand how you say there's layers to it.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, because we're also feeling really fragile as well. So we need to find those environments that we know will be nourishing and like if I'm feeling fragile, the last place I want to go is to a gym where they're like, "Come on, lift those weights." It's like, no, thank you. I need support right now. Yeah, so
Thank
finding
you, Dawn.
you're welcome. Thank you for coming on and being coached. Anyone else would like to have is anyone else have a does can I speak today? I'm not sure. Would like anyone else like to have a coaching session or yeah, Kate, go for it. I think I need to unmute you.
Oh, hi.
There we go.
That was
Hello.
that was a lot of information. Um, I think I'm a bit tired. Yeah, it's sort of sad. Like it's kind of a bit sad. Listen, I'm like, yeah, wow. Like I think my family, like my when you listen to this stuff and you don't even realize that it's what. Uh, sorry, that your child like that shaming techniques were used your whole childhood. It's a bit like icky.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you
Um,
for bringing that in. And you're right, it is. It's confronting. Yeah.
and then do I do that to people, like kind of thing? Yeah, and I'm having this situation at the moment with my partner where I'm like, I feel like I'm being kind of blame shamed, but then I'm not sure if that's just feedback or not.
Can I ask you
Like,
questions around that?
yeah, sure.
Yeah. So if you had a question, what would it be?
How do I know if I'm being blamed, like shamed, what, or is it like legitimate? I guess.
It's a
Sort
really,
of, yeah.
yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
a good question.
Yes, yeah.
And
So
sometimes you might just be like, I know that, yes, I've been a bit much, but I'm like, I don't know if this is the healthiest way to communicate that. It's not making me feel any better. Like, obviously, yeah, like about needing to be more grounded and stuff like that.
how information and feedback is delivered is so important. So,
Well, I
you
guess I don't feel supported if you're
yes,
talking about support. Yeah.
support. Okay. Um, so do you have an example that you are open to discussing?
Or just like you need to, like, you need to ground yourself. You need just lots of, you need to do this, you need to do that kind of thing. Like, you
Uh-huh.
keep doing too much. Um, Sort of like there's nothing wrong with the other person kind of situation.
And
Like,
what
I'm like, this doesn't feel very good. Like,
when someone says
you
you
can't
need
hear me. You can't hear me. You're not, yeah, like,
so when
oh,
someone says you need to ground, so like your partner said you need to ground, what came up for you when they said that?
oh, I'm trying to think. Well, I guess I feel like I was being blamed. Like
Oh,
it's
yep.
my fault. Here we go, the shame thing, right? It's my fault that we're not getting along because I'm trying to do too much because she's not coping with everything. She's not getting anything done. So I
Right.
don't know, it's confusing.
Yeah. So the first response is it's my fault. I'm being blamed.
It feels like it's my fault that we're not. I feel like I'm being blamed that it's my fault because I'm not grounded. That when things are challenging and there's communication problems.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what was
But I
happening?
find those comments not grounding.
Yes. Yeah, it's like
Kind
someone
of,
saying relax. Just
it's
relax.
like that's making me feel worse. Now I
Yeah.
feel like I've really done the shame thing, yeah. And then I'm like, oh, then I go into dorsal vagal because I'm like, I wasn't feeling that bad, but now I feel really crap. Like, am I
Yeah.
that bad? Like, yeah, if
So
that
then
makes
it gets you
sense.
questioning yourself. Okay. So what did you notice was happening with your partner at the time?
Well, she seemed disconnected.
Hmm.
I don't feel like she was really understanding where I was at.
How do you know she was?
But she didn't want to connect either. Like, yeah, I
Yeah.
just needed to go and ground myself somehow.
How did you know she was disconnected?
Well, just the way she was behaving.
Hmm.
Yeah,
How was she behaving?
flapping around, kind of moving quickly, like fight or flighty, like moving
Yeah.
around too quickly, getting frustrated really easily. Um, yeah, the blamey thing. Um, yeah, I'm more fragile, I think, than she was.
And
Uh,
so
so I probably
she,
fawned,
yeah, so she was dysregulated too. And this is the
but
really,
she doesn't believe it. I'm like, that's the thing. It's like, yeah, like that's the problem. I'm like, it's not just me.
yes. So rather than going into shutdown, now that you know she's feeling dysregulated,
Yeah, so I didn't even want to go out. We are meant to do all these nice things, and I was just like, I can't go out. I'm not getting in a car with you now, like because I get triggered when I get when we're yeah. So
what could
sorry.
you do differently if you were to remove the blame? So if you weren't getting blamed, you notice her process is, oh, she's actually dysregulated too. What would you do differently?
Well, I'd probably be able to go and ground myself.
Hmm.
because I wouldn't feel like it's all my fault. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah. And we're meant to be trying to regulate to get that co-regulating thing, right? So that's
Yeah.
yeah.
One way you could look
Uh,
at it as well is bring in that process of, oh, when you said that, I felt like I was getting blamed. But what you're
mm,
saying is that I need to ground. But I'm
mm.
finding it hard to hear that because I feel like you were blaming me. So what's under the blame? That's what I'm curious about. When you feel blamed, what do you notice? What's underneath that?
Doesn't feel fair.
It's not fair.
It's
Yeah.
not fair.
Yeah. Fair. And when things aren't fair, what emotion comes up for you? What sensation comes up in the body?
Well, I get a bit angry
Angry.
actually because I'm like, I am like doing so much stuff, and like, yeah, it's frustrating.
Frustrating and anger.
It does not feel fair. It's like, seriously, like I don't think you're like very regulated right now, but I don't have a mouth on me. It's like, yeah, I'm torn. I'm just like,
So the first part
and
though,
I want to like, well, first of all, I want to like run away, but I don't. So then I just sort of like, yeah.
well, so your process, you just even explained it so well. So you go into unfair, frustrated, anger, but then there's something that then pushes you then into a fawn shutdown.
Mm,
What's
mm.
that part? What do you believe about yourself there?
Um, I can't. Well, either I just have to do what this person
Yes.
wants, thinks they want because that's the safest option. I can't argue with this person if I'm the one who's apparently not regulated,
Okay. So that's really good to
or
know.
it's not worth. Or like, yeah, or it's not safe to. I try to sort of be like, uh, could you rephrase that with I statements, please? Like, yeah.
And if you were to phrase it with I statements now to respond, how
Mm.
would you do that?
I don't know if I'm not very good at that. I feel hurt that
Yeah.
I'm getting blamed all the time for our miscommunications.
Beautiful. I feel hurt, and the story, you could even be like, and the story I'm telling myself is that I'm getting blamed all the time about our miscommunication,
Mm.
feeling hurt about that. Is that true? Like, do you,
And sometimes, yeah, and I try
and
and
then you could,
actually use all the techniques I've been learning, and still
yeah.
sometimes it doesn't sort of work, and I'm like, oh,
And that's because in the moment your nervous system's going into a shutdown. So your brain, the part of your brain that communicates from the I statements has also shut down. So it's
mm,
not until regulation and coming back up the ladder where you will be able to access that part. So now you're able to access it more, and that's when you can think more clearly to then reapproach the situation with repair and be like, okay,
mm.
when we had that.
Because my brain now doesn't trust because I've seen that, as you know, I see that the fight flight person, like my brain now finds it hard to trust. You know how like it fixates on the that person will behave in a reasonable fashion. Like I know it's in my head, but you know that like that thing
Yeah.
that happens.
Yeah, yeah. So your protector's coming in because it's like it's not safe to do that.
Yes, correct. Yes, that's how. Yeah, thank you for
Yeah.
rephrasing that. Yes, the protector's like this person's not very safe. They're
Right.
very volatile.
So what does your protector need to be able to feel safe enough to approach your partner to talk about this?
I don't know
Mhm.
because yeah, I don't really feel very safe to say anything at the moment.
So it's at the moment, maybe what the protector's saying is that It's just not until I feel safe enough to be able to then express this.
Yeah.
Is there anything that can support you to feel safe enough?
I don't know. Because 1 minute she'll be all right, then yeah, the next she'll be frustrated. See, I'm very fawny, aren't I? I'm like, oh. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I don't know.
So this is the part of accessing if she is frustrated, will I still be okay? Will I be able to, am I capable of handling that? And maybe at this
Mm,
point in time, you don't feel like you are. So it might be
no.
speaking to someone for support just to get you back
Yep.
up the ladder, just to
Yep.
come back up. Might be going to do your foraging that you do. It might be going to do something that can bring you
So you're saying that I need to go and grab myself, lol.
and full circle.
Yeah.
Well, is it your protector saying, I don't want to go ground myself? I don't want to do that.
Yeah, it says I'm too busy for that. I ain't got no time for that. I've got to get a roof on so we have a bedroom. Yeah, a building at the moment, and it's like I don't have any time for that. Mm.
Hey, what happens if you were to create some time for that?
Well, that would be good. Yeah, I was meant to do that after this.
Thanks,
Mm.
Glenda. See you soon.
Yeah.
But there's a little resistance there.
Mm. So I just says you don't have time for that.
You don't have time for that.
You don't have time for that.
Ah.
I can
Would it
make some time.
would it be outside your window of tolerance if you were to say, we're going to create time for that? Or do you think it's possible?
I think it's possible I could make some time.
Hey, great. Amazing. But there's discomfort in it. And I notice that. I can see that.
Mm.
It's like this.
Then it's like
I don't
two
want it.
full days, and yeah.
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 Okay. So here you go with that. Is there
Mm.
anything else
Oh, thank you.
you
Oh, no, no, just it's just really interesting about shame, and you're like, wow, that's like it. Just when you realize that that's some people's whole communication system, it's terrible.
yeah.
It's
Yes.
amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, and you're spot
Yeah,
on. Thanks, Sophia. See you later. You're spot
yeah.
on around um you're spot on around that's how people have communicated for a long time. So yes, we
Mm,
do internalize it and then we
mm,
communicate from that way until we start to do the healing personal development work.
mm.
We start
Yeah.
to see those parts of us. And so then we build more empathy within ourselves, for ourselves and for others.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. All right. Nice work, Kate.
Thank you.
Thanks. Well, thanks for joining, everyone. Thanks, Mel. It's your first time here. Nice to see you here. Did anyone else have a question? Have you got a question, Mel?
Well, first of all, thank you for allowing me in, even though I was late. I was going to say sorry, and I'm like, no, I'll change that story. Um, I just wanted to ask if it's okay, if there's time. Um, I've been in therapy for like 15 years with different things and tried all different modes. One of the things I've been looking at recently is the concept of attachment styles in relationships. So anxious, like I identify as anxious avoidant, and my partner is dismissive avoidant. And using that shame framework is actually really interesting because when you got to the bit about the shutdown, I'm like, oh, that's him.
Mm,
And probably some of the other bits were like, oh, that's me, probably both of us. Um, and I guess my question is that a useful framework to integrate with what you just spoke about? I don't know. But
yeah,
I'm trying to rationalize that in my head or process it.
absolutely. Attachment theory follows us throughout our life. So I really love that framework to show us our protector and just our patterns around that. and our insecurities that come up. And so, yeah, for someone that leans more dismissive avoidant, shame comes in the form of, you would know this if you're reading about it, is like the fear of rejection. So I have this fear of getting close and being vulnerable and intimate with someone, and softening, because when I do that, I fear that they will dismiss me, minimize, devalue me, or do something that happened probably when I was young. And so there's this discomfort and fear that comes into the body when there is connection, there is deep connection. And so being able to witness that part, like, so I want, as a dismissive avoidant, I would want to see the part of me that was dismissed so severely that I hardened up and pushed through life to get to where I am today. So that part of me is that little vulnerable, disempowered part, that part that feels really like scared, that feels little, that feels shame. Until I access that part, I'll find it really difficult to lean into connection. Or I will do it, but I will have some walls up. There'll be a bit of a distance there. And then leaning towards, disorganized or anxious avoidant is the other name for it. That's where shame comes in. It's like, that's where, like, I'm broken, right? Like there's something wrong with me because I really want connection, but I fear it at the same time. I really want to lean in, but I fear it at the same time. And so being able to see what I've learned really deeply with people who have more of a disorganized attachment is that shame is actually really strong. Like it can be a real strong cover. And leaning in to what I would suggest for that space is your mind will attach to stories so strongly. It's like life or death. Like, and so bringing in the if you can strengthen your observer, that will be the thing that will change your life, because the observer will support you with not attaching to the stories. When you've disorganized, for those watching the replay, that's, you didn't get you've got neglected a lot. There's abuse. There's compared to, like, and we're not comparing, but anxious attachment and dismissive avoidant are a bit different. But with disorganized, you didn't experience either one of those. So like you experience worse, like negative in the anxious attachment and in the dismissive avoidance. So like exploring life, there was neglect, and then also with your emotions and stuff, there was also neglect. So you've got to work through these thoughts that will come up around paranoia, distrusting people, all that sort of stuff, which will be really high.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I think, yeah, it's just interesting. And for me, I'm like, I want to analyze it. I want to process it. I want to fit it all in because it all feels great. And, I'd love to hear all of that. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Jan. Yeah, well, because you said that you've been doing a lot of work and being in therapy and that sort of thing, what I would say would be the next step is the mind will have like really strong stories, but your feeling state will be what will be able to support you. That's accurate. Your activation, so your zone of genius will be your activations. It's also the very thing that can be really difficult for you in life. Because your instincts are incredible. Like you'll have like really incredible instincts and you could pick up things really well, but the mind wants to make meaning from it, and that's where we lose the accuracy.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah. What makes sense for you with that?
So I'm writing it down because I have a terrible memory. When I have incredible instincts, I have a terrible memory. I like the bit about the mind wants to make meaning, and that's where you lose accuracy. So Len's over the top of that, diagnosed with ADHD and autism as well. So I actually don't know how much I believe in that diagnosis and how all that fits in, but I still use that as a bit of a thing. But I know that my mind is the thing that kills me is very dramatic, but it's my mind. I can go in, feed that story, it'll go up and up and up. Listening to the first lady that spoke, was it Kate? No, whoever spoke first.
Sophia.
Listening to her, Sophia, and how it sort of built up and all the different things. I was like, yeah, I can get that. And mine, but I can go from 0 to 100 in 2 seconds and then take action and then self-sabotage and then have to undo it all. And the shame until recently has overtaken, and then I've just withdrawn and not even tried and just gone, yeah, it's my fault because I'm broken. And
Yeah.
rather than going, oh, look what my mind just started and my emotions took over. And then the other person and their stuff mingled with that. And then we created this magnificent mess of craziness. So I've got a lot more. I think the framework of the attachment styles has given me this awareness that really helps me slow down that thinking and slows down the mind and makes me think about what's the root cause underneath that's driving the mind to go haywire and create these amazing stories. And thinking about the other person as well and what their mind might be doing and how they're going. So I think awareness is a beautiful thing as you build those levels of awareness and you have more and more different frameworks that you can draw from. It just makes it some weirdly easier. It's still a hard thing, but it for
Yeah.
me, it gives me comfort to know that there's different ways of thinking and different tools that I can use and that kind of thing.
Absolutely, yeah. And awareness with integration will be the next thing. And the
Yeah.
integration piece will be the body piece and the
Hmm.
feeling phase. What I have experienced a pattern, if someone leans more disorganized, it's hard to do the body piece, feelings based stuff, because you need to build rapport with your therapist or the person that you're working with to a point where on a subconscious level, you can go into the body. So, because
Mm,
I know that you'd be really switched on, intellectual, like no concepts really well. Even how you explained it, I'm like, you explained it beautifully. And so what it would be is like, how can we access the information in the body? And that is
mm.
trusting to go into that, and softening into that will be the work that I would recommend leaning into.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
You're so welcome. Okay, thank you for sticking in there. And everyone, yeah, there's a few people that have gone. Jan's, I think, walked away. She's still there.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'll put this up as a replay, and might see you all next week for the next subject, next
Yeah.
masterclass.
Many
See you
thanks.
later. Bye. Bye, Jan.